what area would a geothermal plant cover? Because like windmills, they need a large amount of space. But what is the radius of a hole?
At the surface, the hole would start off as, let's say, 36 inches, 3 feet, and then ideally we would aim for that hole to be as large as possible at the total depth of the well. So let's say we drill to 5 kilometers. Then by the time we got down to 5 kilometers, if we could, we would want to finish that in about a 12.25 inch section. As Martin mentioned, the footprint of the well pad might be 100 meters, but when we move away, the actual surface facility for a small project could be the size of a domestic garage, let's say.
Thank you. And expanding on from this, obviously we want to get as much power as possible into people's homes. So if we were to use geothermal as instead of wind power or solar panel on people's houses, how easy would it be to install the cables? Because obviously the house has already been built, and how easily would the cabling fit into that?
There is some infrastructure work that needs to be done. District heating requires piping, and that does involve some initial upheaval, but basically it's digging holes in the ground as you would have any utility company coming in. So it's only initial disruption. But the great thing is that once a geothermal well is in place, you can produce that heating for a very, very long time. And because at CeraPhi we have closed loop systems, then our wells will also last a long time. So once everything has been installed and that initial trouble and inconvenience is forgotten, then the heat from a geothermal well can say last 50 to 100 years without having any need for maintenance before you have to go in and do something else to it. But the great thing about it, you're comparing it to wind and solar, it's a base load solution, which means that it is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, every day of the year. And if you have a 1 megawatt plant and it starts producing 1 megawatt, then that's what it produces through its life. So that's a definite asset. If you compare it to offshore wind, for example, offshore wind in the UK has a 40% efficiency rate. So there are definite advantages to geothermal energy.
Thank you, Andy. So expanding on from that, Carl, what would you say the limitations are? We've covered a lot of the advantages, but there must be limitations to this process.
Yeah, I think limitations today really go to the point of really people just being aware of the capacity of what can be achieved out of it. And I think at the moment, you know, as I mentioned earlier, most of the focus is on the low-hanging fruit, accessible, you know, wind and solar options, which are, you know, readily available around us, and everyone can sort of reach for them anywhere. You know, and also, I think, you know, political influence and government understanding of really where heat plays into the mix and can be used more efficiently is key to actually driving the geothermal side forward. At the moment, you know, if you take the UK, the government's approach is very much to electrify heat or to find a solution with something like, you know, blue hydrogen, which is okay, but it's still coming from a fossil fuel background in some respects. So, you know, where heat can play a massive part in the process from geothermal is that, you know, we use at least 30 to 40% of our energy in electricity is used for some form of conversion to heat, or on the other side to cooling. So, you know, there are, I think, a lot of downsides at the moment in people's perception and also the way geothermal is conventionally being done as to the way it can be done or should be looking at being done. You know, we are getting more towards microgrids, and the talks about microgrids and microgrid solutions. And our focus is very much looking at modular, scalable, plug and play solutions rather than, you know, large plants in the middle of a country and, you know, tens of thousands of kilometers of distribution transmission systems, which effectively is redundant infrastructure. You know, we need to start getting away from that, so you don't end up like problems like Texas had in February, where half the, you know, state was shut down because of transmission systems shutting down and things like this. So if you put energy where people need it, and you have multiple power sources there in smaller chunks, it becomes a lot more manageable. And at the end of the day, the customer and the end user gets more benefit out of it. And effectively, it's a lot more manageable. If you need to decommission and shut down, or you need to change something, it becomes more economical to do it, you know, or even scale up in many respects, you know.